The guns have fallen silent over Gaza and the hostages are back in Israel. And I must say, it is an emotional moment after this horror, this darkness.
At a very human level, peace has broken out in the Middle East, and you can see it in the faces of the people in the Palestinian territory of Gaza. But turning that into a peace that lasts in Gaza is a monumental diplomatic challenge.
If he keeps at it and he does bring a peace in the next year that will hold and will be revolutionary in the Middle East that no other one has ever been able to do, then I think he will deserve the Nobel Peace Prize. I personally will wear a MAGA hat for at least one day.
I'd like to see that, boy.
I will do it, I promise you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our latest episode of The X-Files with me, Christiane Amanpour.
And Jamie Rubin, two-time State Department official under Clinton and Biden.
And that's quite relevant today, and relevant also. I'm a longtime CNN correspondent, have covered many global conflicts and wars, including in the Middle East. And we speak and we're recording as the hostages have been released, the prisoners have been released, the Palestinian prisoners, and Trump has addressed the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. So we are going to ask, how long can this last? And can a ceasefire actually be translated into what has to happen? That is a lasting peace. And then we'll also ask, does Trump deserve the Nobel Prize? So, Jamie, let's get started. And don't forget, guys, please subscribe, please follow us, please download. You can always listen to us on globalplayer.com and on our YouTube channel. So as we record, it really is a good news day. The guns have fallen silent over Gaza and the hostages are back in Israel. And I must say, it is an emotional moment after this horror, this darkness, covering this for me. I mean, every single day for 2 years. And I've been plunged really into an emotional sort of spiral over the last 2 years because it's just been so endlessly horrendous. Just to think, I remember interviewing Israelis who survived the immediate October 7th massacre. And I actually broke down a couple of times when you saw young people who'd just been dancing, at a festival, and they were like all beaten up or they had bullet wounds and it was just horrendous. And then 2 days later, I'd be unable to sleep because of the unbelievable war that was unleashed on men, women, and children in Gaza. And all I could think of when I went to bed was, these people are going to sleep under bombs, these children, and nothing can be done to save them. So it is emotionally also an amazing thing that this has finally happened. Don't you think?
I do. And I watched this for 6 months or 9 months working directly for Secretary Blinken and the president on Gaza. And it was wrenching to watch what was happening in Gaza, because by then the Israelis had achieved their objectives more than a year ago. They had killed the leaders of Hamas. They had destroyed Hamas as the leaders who conducted this attack. And by the way, there was a really horrific New York Times story that came out yesterday of the actual tapes of what Sinwar and his leaders ordered his people to do on October 7th. The murder, the burnings, the killings of innocent men, women, and children in Israel were ordered by Sinwar and his people. The New York Times came up with the actual documents and recordings and reported that yesterday. I thought that was really, really an incredible story. So that was wrenching, number one. And then what the Israelis did to average Gazans was wrenching, number two. And so that brings us to the real question is, could this have been done a year ago? Could this have been done at the beginning of the Trump administration?
But here's the thing. Trump, suggested it to Sisi, the president of Egypt. Sisi apparently then called Netanyahu. He said he'd consider it. Then it went flashing all around that he was going. And then all of a sudden he said he wasn't going. To me, that's a political thing. I don't know. Hear me out for a minute. But the prime minister of Israel did not want to be locked in a room around a table with his biggest benefactor, Donald Trump, who he knows wants a peace deal, a two-state solution, nor did he want to be locked in a room with all the other Arab states and nations and Europeans who've also always doubled down on the two-state solution. Either because he doesn't believe in it, Jamie, even at this point, or because he's still trying to please his extreme right flank, the extreme Orthodox nationalists, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, and the like. Is it a missed opportunity?
Absolutely. Look, Donald Trump has power over Netanyahu. There's no question about that. We watched him put Netanyahu on the phone with the Prime Minister of Qatar and make him read an apology that was written out for him. Netanyahu doesn't want that to happen in front of all the other leaders who want a two-state solution. But let me just be clear to people listening. We are a long way from a two-state solution. The next step is peace in Gaza that lasts. And for it to last, two big things have to happen. The Hamas has to really step back, has to be neutered, has to be demilitarized, and an Arab force has to go in so that that's possible. The good news, to the extent there's ever good news in these horrors, is that the people of Gaza have had enough of both Hamas and the Israeli military. And that's why the most important next step, what I hope is going on in Sharm el-Sheikh right now, is that all the leaders who have the ability to call in troops under a UN resolution make commitments. If Donald Trump is being smart right now, and I have no reason to think his people are this sophisticated, given what I've read about the last few weeks and how difficult it's been to plan for this next phase, they will be gathering troop commitments right now from the likes of Indonesia and Egypt and the UAE and all these people who have to go in to replace the Israelis so that we can have a long-term peace. And that's the crucial next step. And during our time last year, let me tell you, a lot of people sort of show that they would like to send in troops, but to get them actually to send in troops under a sort of an organization by the Central Command of the U.S., but real troops is a big, big step. And that's the biggest step that needs to be taken. And I hope it's going on in Sharm el-Sheikh right now.
So I remember very, very well in Bosnia at the end of the US-led, peace accord at Dayton, which basically, there was an end to the war. Before there was any sort of resolution, the next step was bringing the 60,000 strong NATO force led by the United States to start policing the situation before there could be any pullback or political resolution. So I'm also very nervous that there hasn't been that gathered, as you say. I'm very nervous that they haven't got a big pledge. And I've heard from my interlocutors that, let's say, countries like Kazakhstan, which have been asked for troops and which have good relations with both Israel and the Palestinians and the Arab states, they're willing. But countries like Kazakhstan have now said not yet because they don't see a plan on the table for the future. So this is going to be incredibly important. There has to be an absolute commitment to the political plan and then to really gather all the nations that will be willing to come in and do as you say.
So the political plan is essentially two steps. Step one is who governs Gaza, who is in charge, who makes decisions about the daily lives of the Gazans and the role of the international force, and including the role of the international force in making Hamas neutered, disarmed, demilitarized. So that's one thing. The next is this long-term political plan of moving from Palestinian governance in Gaza to a two-state solution. The first part, let me give you some sort of feel for it. A year ago, we worked on the governance structure for Gaza, and it was torture. The Palestinian Authority wanted to be on top. The UAE said, fine, if it's a reformed Palestinian Authority. The Saudis said, fine, as long as the UAE doesn't get to choose the people on top. So the Arabs have a history of arguing with each other over who's going to have the right influence over that Palestinian governance structure. Meanwhile, in the Trump plan, it's Donald Trump and Tony Blair. Well, Donald Trump isn't going to work on governing Gaza. Tony Blair might, and that's why I think he is a good choice and the right choice. But he can only do that if President Trump gives him the power to use Trump's juice to make the Arabs, including the Palestinians, including the Indonesians, including the Turks, including the Egyptians, all come up with a reasonable structure that the Israelis tolerate. Because remember, the hardest thing of all about this next phase, the Israelis will want the right to go in and out of Gaza when they, quote, see a threat. And that is going to be a killer amendment if they insist on that.
Yeah.
And it's going to require someone like Tony Blair, maybe Sigrid Kaag, this Dutch woman who works in the UN system, who the Israelis trust, who are going to have to filter those Israeli requests to go in and deal with some threat from Hamas, which would kill the international force or would force people to not participate in it. So these are incredible subtleties. It's going to require incredibly subtle diplomats, and Donald Trump isn't that person. Tony Blair is, but he doesn't have yet the full power, and the Palestinians have to let him govern, even though, as you said last week, he's not the most obvious choice because of the British role in the Sinai in Egypt, and in his role in the Iraq war, and his perception of being close to Netanyahu. But those past experiences he has, I think, would make it possible for him to sort through all those subtleties I mentioned.
Well, I thought that it was really interesting when Mike Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador, very evangelical to Israel, basically poo-pooed anybody's contribution to this ceasefire, including the British contribution, and said, no, it was all Donald Trump. And then Trump's own handpicked envoy, Steve Witkoff, posted on X that he was so grateful for Jonathan Powell, the current national security advisor here, and back then in the Blair administration, who really also midwifed the Good Friday Accords. Witkoff said that was the unbelievable help, and the details that he got into were priceless. So it could happen if Blair and Powell and that lot are given the latitude to bring that kind of template. And by the way, we already know, because Oslo has the whole plan, we know what it's going to look like. The Clinton parameters of 2001, in fact, have it all laid out. And Clinton himself has said, one day when peace comes, it is going to look like this. And we're going to be very sorry that Yasser Arafat in 2000 said no. Too late. He said yes in 2001 when Clinton was out of office. But it is possible. I'd like to leave some hope on the table, because it is possible. Intractable conflicts have been resolved. And as bad as this one is, and as much as religion is invoked, and thousands of years of religion are invoked, it is possible if the willingness is there, and if America, which truly has the only leverage, certainly with Israel, that matters, and the person of Donald Trump stays put. And on that level, I just want to keep just raising the fact that he did try to do the right thing with North Korea in his first term, as we know, Jamie, and he met Kim Jong-un, who nobody else wanted to meet with, and having insulted him and, done the whole bullying thing from the UN pulpit, then met him and got a whole, some thawing underway, only to not follow up when they went back to so this is the key, I know, and I don't know how it's going to change.
Here's the way it has to happen. Donald Trump has basically an aide-de-camp named Marco Rubio, who's his, quote, Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, and runs the foreign aid program. Obviously, he can't do all of those things. And in fact, Witkoff has played the real role of Secretary of State by going around the world doing the negotiations.
I will say all the leaders I've talked to say that Jared Kushner is the one who brought this one home.
Let me get to that. So Witkoff has not been a success in anything he's done because he has no clue about what he's doing, because he's a real estate lawyer. When he combines with people who have some experience, like Tony Blair and Tony Blair's former chief of staff, currently national security advisor in the UK, Jonathan Powell, or Jared Kushner, who has had some experience in the Abraham Accords, Witkoff can be a useful, intermediary for those two people to get involved. Jared Kushner is not going to stay involved day to day. That's the point. Neither is Witkoff going to be good enough. Neither is Rubio. He's got 500 other things to do. That's why you're right to say that Blair needs to be empowered with the help of Jonathan Powell and some experts from the United States. But if Donald Trump and Tony Blair, who are named in this agreement, have a direct line, Blair can get this done. Now, what does that really mean? That means coming up with an actual governance structure for Gaza that gives the Palestinian Authority a prominent voice, but not the role, because the Israelis will not allow the PA to have a dominant role, because they're still under Netanyahu. They have their heads in the sand. But I want to say this because you've heard me say this before, but it has to be talked about a lot. Everyone says you can't kill an ideology like Hamas. You can. The way to kill it is to move towards a two-state solution, which Hamas opposes. They like to claim that October 7th caused the Israelis to move on a Palestinian state, but they don't believe in two states. They believe in one state. So if the Israelis are smart, They're going to let Tony Blair and Donald Trump help them keep the peace for the next year. And then there'll be an election in Israel. There has to be next year. And then Israel has to decide whether it wants to meet the goal its founders set for itself: peace and security and recognition from all its neighbors. And that means empowering the Palestinian Authority, moving towards a two-state solution, and killing Hamas by killing its ideology
Okay,
of
okay.
one
Steady on
state.
there. Steady on now. Lots of neutering and killing coming out of your mouth today. Listen, let's take a
diplomats
break.
can be tough too, you know.
Yeah. Let's not forget also that they hope there'll be an election in the Palestinian Authority, and let's not forget the price that all those civilians have paid, the Palestinian civilians in Gaza, the ongoing horrors in the West Bank, which we don't know how that's going to end up. Trump has said, I won't let them annex it, but Ben Gvir, Smotrich are busy, empowering settlers to chase out Palestinians, burn their villages and their olive groves and the like. Let's not forget also that it is going to take a very long time for those Israeli hostages to get not just the physical, but the mental health care that they need to get past, if they can, what happened over the last 2 years. And also, they're coming back to a first world nation. The Palestinians are coming back from tents that they've been moving around to a hellhole.
I mean, this is going to be the most complex humanitarian reconstruction peace operation the world has ever seen.
Yeah, and don't forget, we had the Marshall Plan. It is possible. I'm not going to give up hope, but it's going to take a long time. But I will tell you that I was talking to, a very senior level Arab official who said, we have seen the pictures of what's happened in Gaza and all the stuff you're seeing, even the drone footage and what you've seen on social media from the journalists and people inside Gaza, not even close to the extent of the devastation that we will find out when finally we are allowed back in. Let's take a break because we're going to go to talk in a moment after a break about, could it have happened earlier? Why is it Trump and not Biden? Does Trump deserve the Nobel Peace Prize? And did Trump engage in some interference in Israeli domestic affairs from his podium at the Knesset? We'll talk about that in a moment. All right, welcome back, Jamie. We're in part 2 of our discussion, and we're going to talk about why couldn't this have happened earlier? In other words, it must stick in your craw, right? And all the Biden administrations, particularly since we're told it could have happened in September of 2024 when you guys were still in office. It could even have happened in January of 2025 when you did the handover to Trump. So why did it take Trump and his totally out of the box diplomacy to actually make this happen? Can you think about that and digest that at this point?
Yeah, I mean, look, during the time we were in office, this was extraordinarily painful for those of us working on it, both because of the mass murder conducted against Israelis, and there was some incredible New York Times reporting about what Sinwar and his people ordered the Hamas fighters to do, killing, burnings, and videotaping it so the whole world would see it in the hopes of causing a massive uprising around the Arab world. All of that failed. And then when Gaza was attacked by Israel, and we had to deal every day with trying to make the Israelis take care of the innocent women and men and children who were caught up in it. So this was gut-wrenching throughout, and we thought we could end it, and we could have ended it a year ago. I would say, had we started earlier in January, and frankly, had President Biden been willing to bring the hammer down earlier on Netanyahu, it was possible, because what we've seen in the last few weeks is that President Trump can tell Netanyahu enough is enough. Mm-hmm. Now, there is one factor that's new and different under Trump, and I have to give him credit for this, is that he brought in a relationship with Turkey that has changed things a bit. And Hamas has been weakened by the fact that its sponsor, Iran, was weakened in the Israeli U.S. attacks on Iran. So there are some new factors. But again, really, in the end, Donald Trump told Bibi enough is enough.
When he attacked Qatar.
With Qatar, after he hit Qatar. But Donald Trump could have told him that in January. When he said he was going to end the war in 24 hours, or was that Ukraine? I mean, he made some promises that he didn't keep to end the war quickly. As far as Netanyahu is concerned, he didn't achieve the objectives he stated. the destruction of Hamas, the end of Hamas. And Trump forced him to accept less than he demanded. They can't annex the West Gaza. They can't send the Palestinians out of Gaza. And Trump could have done that in January. What I think happened here is that Trump finally got angry with Netanyahu after his act of hubris by attacking Qatar, which is a friend of Trump's. As you know, the 747 he wants comes from Qatar. So he's got a special relationship with them. And the U.S. has an air base in Qatar. So all of those are reasons. But the suffering that went on this year, this calendar year, for 10 long months, didn't have to happen if Trump had acted 10 months ago.
And you just mentioned Ukraine. Do you think there's a template here? Do you think Trump can transpose what he did to, Netanyahu? I know they're different stories, but you think there's any way Trump can, translate that to Putin and end that war?
I'm getting another cramp every time we talk about the Middle East. I get a cramp in my leg.
But anyway,
Putin. And that's the difference, is Trump doesn't have the leverage over Vladimir Putin that he thinks he does. He doesn't have the ability to tell Putin to stop the war the way he could to Netanyahu. He hasn't done the things necessary to build that leverage by increasing sanctions, by giving more weapons to Ukraine. He could be doing those things and then get the leverage on Putin. And then maybe, just maybe, we could get that war stopped. But that's going to be a whole hell of a lot harder. We're talking about a nuclear power, the biggest land power in the world. But Russia is a bigger power than Israel. Let's face it, as much as we talk about Israel. But it's a much, much bigger country, and it's led by a dictator, not a democracy, as flawed as Israel's democracy can be. It is a democracy. Putin is a dictator, and he, frankly, doesn't care what the rest of the world thinks because he's got the Chinese and the Iranians and the North Koreans on his side. So that's the hard part.
Yeah. And, it's funny because Trump said, and he's even said it out loud now, I thought the Putin bit would be easier because of my relationship with Putin, but clearly that didn't work out. Listen, we said, does Trump deserve the Nobel Peace Prize? Look, he wasn't going to get it this year because, as we know, the work has to be done in 2024 if you're going to get the prize. It's the year before. But if he keeps at it and he does bring, a peace in the next year that will hold and will be revolutionary in the Middle East that no other one has ever been able to do. They've tried, but it hasn't worked. Then I think he will deserve the Nobel Peace Prize. I personally will wear a MAGA hat for at least one day. And I will say, well done.
I'd like to see that.
I will do it. I promise you. I have to say, I am quoting a former Labour shadow foreign minister, Emily Thornberry, who I heard say it on the radio, and I thought that was a really good way to put it.
Well, I'm never going to wear a MAGA hat, I'll tell you.
For one day.
But a Nobel Peace Prize doesn't belong to Donald Trump until he turns this temporary ceasefire into a two-state solution.
Yes,
he's not going to be able to do that in the next year.
He might.
It's not going to happen in the next year. No way.
He might if he knocks heads together.
No, I don't think it's possible. There's too hard.
Then nothing's possible.
Towards a two-state solution in the 1 year. That's going to be something that takes 5 to 10 years, and will require him and his team to spend 2 or 3 years working on it. We worked in Oslo for a decade to try to bring peace to the Palestinians and the Israelis. When we had the best of goodwill,
I know, but you've got all that legwork done.
When we had Bill Clinton.
I know, you've got all the legwork done. You need the political will, and you need America to weigh in.
I don't agree, and I'll tell you why. Israel has changed in those 20 years. Israel has become a more angry, more right-wing country than it was 25 years ago when it elected Ehud Barak, who offered Syria the Golan Heights for peace.
That is bad. It's not hopeful. So in the Knesset, Jamie, I was struck by two things, a lot of things, but two things mainly. When Bibi Netanyahu started and he spoke before Trump, I swear to God, I waited for, okay, I'm going to get picked up if I say this, but at least 5 minutes, maybe it was 3 minutes, maybe it was 7 minutes, before he even mentioned the hostages. Thank you, Donald Trump, for letting us have sovereignty over the Golan Heights. Thank you, Donald Trump, for telling us that, we have a historical claim to, as they say, Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. I mean, I couldn't believe it. It was the most unbelievable domestic political speech. And only then did he talk about the hostages. And that is why the people there are so angry with him, because he's put the hostages literally second, third, and fourth on his list of priority.
What you're right about right there is why it's going to be hard to get a two-state solution, because the leaders of Israel for more than a decade now have been building up settlements in the West Bank, have been conducting now for the last 2 years this war in Gaza. And the idea of a Palestinian state is going to take a lot of real political leadership in Israel to change minds. And that's why I keep talking about killing Hamas by a two-state solution. If you're angry with Hamas, you want a two-state solution. That needs to be a slogan that is built up in Israel so that people there acknowledge what is essentially true, what I just said about the ideology. And instead of thinking that you're rewarding the Palestinians after October 7th, and that's going to require a real change in mindset. And the Israeli leaders are not going to be able to do that until there's been an election, maybe one, maybe two, and the real change occurs in Israel, because the Palestinian Authority is now led by people who are willing to accept all the things that Yasser Arafat said no to. They're ready to accept the Clinton parameters. They're ready to say yes right now. What has to change is in Israel. And I frankly don't see Donald Trump and Bibi Netanyahu on the White House lawn saying the things that Yitzhak Rabin said, that Bill Clinton said. Remember the famous phrase, the quiet miracle of a normal life?
Well, you remember Bill Clinton.
Words.
And I remember Yitzhak Rabin saying, enough of blood and tears, enough.
And I don't see that coming out of Netanyahu's mouth. So that's the problem.
Maybe the people of Israel, I don't know whether this holds up, but I heard today on the radio, a fairly new poll says that some 70% of both Israel and Palestinians want to have a secure, independent, sovereign future for each of them. So that's not bad. And then I wonder what the Israeli people will think when all the journalistic investigations go on. It's already been written by negotiators that it was Netanyahu who broke the ceasefire in March.
And October 7th. He's got to pay a price for being prime minister when October 7th happened, and he still hasn't paid a price for that.
But there are 2 times, apparently, according to Gershon Baskin and others, that he broke the ceasefire in March of 25 and made it clear that the prime minister was not interested in a peace deal back in the last round of major negotiations in September 24, when you guys were still in office.
I can tell you that from firsthand, that they were not ready to do what they're ready to do now. But I should also say that the Palestinians are much more cooperative today. The Palestinian Authority is not demanding leadership of Gaza the way they were a year ago, because some wise Norwegian diplomats have explained to Abu Mazen, don't talk about that now. Tony Blair and others will help you be the leader in Gaza, because the only alternative to the Hamas is the PA. But instead of demanding it on paper, which the Israelis could veto, they're just doing it quietly. So there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic, but there's some big reasons to doubt that Netanyahu and Trump are going to be the pair that makes peace.
Trump has to, but Netanyahu may be voted out. He faces an election before Trump, but maybe not. He lost the last election and only managed to stay in office because he cobbled together that far-right extremist, orthodox, nationalist
policy. Is going to be one thing in the election: anyone but Bibi, ABB.
Well, we'll see. Now, the other thing, Jamie, I don't know whether you heard it, but Trump, at the end of his speech, turned to President Isaac Herzog and said, Mr. President, I urge you to give Bibi a pardon. He's a hero, this and that. What is behind all that? I mean, it would have been one thing when the war was still going on and have him, okay, we pardon you, now get out of politics and never run again. But it's another thing now that he's claiming victory to grant him a pardon. I mean, we're talking about his corruption trial that is ongoing.
Yes, well, I do know why you asked me that question, so let me choose my words very carefully here. Donald Trump doesn't believe that leaders should be prosecuted for anything. As you know, in the United States, there were a lot of things he could have been prosecuted for that he doesn't believe ought to happen. But he's happy to have anyone else prosecuted, regardless of whether it's legitimate or not. So that's point one. Point two, he has no problem interfering in the Israeli political system by making that proposal. Now, number three, and here's where I'm going to be very careful about this. It is possible to think about a president of Israel pardoning Bibi Netanyahu, which would eliminate his concern about permitting elections before it's required next, whatever that is, next fall. And that's been the problem up till now, is that Netanyahu doesn't want to face the prospect of prison time, even though he could go out a hero if he made peace with the Palestinians and got recognition with the Saudis. So what if he spends a year in a minimum security prison? Anyway, he and his family, probably his wife and others, are so, if you've ever seen the film The Bibi Files,
I
are
certainly
so
have.
sure that they can just block the Israeli legal system that they're not prepared to face the music of a country of laws. And Trump is trying to jump over all that. But even if the president were willing to do that, and I don't know, he might. I somehow don't think the Israeli prime minister now and his wife are going to allow that to happen.
Interesting. Right. On that note, talk about interfering in another country's domestic politics, Mr. Trump. On that note, I hope that President Trump stays focused and makes this happen, because it's the only way right now that I can see an end and a light in this tunnel. So, Jamie, let's take a break. When we come back, a quick final segment with our recommendations for this week. Okay, we're back, and we've got a short time now, Jamie, to talk about our recommendations, because we really did blabber on a lot about the piece, which,
which is not hard to do. Let's face it.
And
right?
it is a good news story, and I want to be optimistic, and I want to hold these leaders, to account so that they keep doing it, because they've got a chance, man. They've got a chance. And if they blow it now, then it's on them. So I'm talking about the Middle East. So my recommendation, Jamie, is this book. It's not very, very, very new, but it is Julie Andrews, who's the most wonderful, wonderful, wonderful person. This is called Homework, a memoir of my Hollywood years. She just turned 91 a couple of weeks ago. And all I know is that I grew up on the songs and the acting and the beauty and the joy of Julie Andrews. And then I think also to note that at the age of 91, she turned 90, but at the age of 91, a few days later, Jane Goodall, the wonderful Jane Goodall, died, and she was the great naturalist. And maybe I mentioned it last week, but I've listened to so many podcasts that I want everybody to go and watch the Jane Goodall documentaries and listen to what you can from her and get some wonderful sort of sound recordings of Julie Andrews. It'll put you in a really good mood. That's what I think. That's what we need.
I hope so. Well, I can't honestly say my recommendation will put you in a good mood, but it's a great deep think. So I'm going to put my book up to the camera. What We Know, Ian McEwan's new book.
Oh, yes.
It's absolutely brilliant. I finished it last night. Now, why is it brilliant? Well, first of all, we all know Ian McEwan is brilliant, but I think, as a fellow reviewer put it, this is the best book he's written in decades.
Oh, good.
Now, why is it the best? Well, I love.
Can you make it snappy?
Yeah, I will.
You're getting all professorial.
I love historical fiction. As you know, I've read a lot of Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and all that stuff.
Now you're just showing off.
Now I am. This book manages to incorporate in a storytelling environment all of these issues. I wrote them all down: AI, climate, Alzheimer's, geopolitics, affairs in married couples, poetry, and then family dynamics where parents make their children screwed up when they grow older. And
boy.
All of those 7 or 8 topics that are very current in our modern world are woven together in a dramatic way, where the future of the next 30 years and 100 years is discussed, in the current time is discussed as well. There's a gigantic dinner party that it's all based on, where in the UK, in Oxford, in a big barn, there's a gigantic dinner party that a poet recounts a poem. I won't say more than that, but managing to weave in the AI threat, the climate change threat, the Alzheimer's reality for many, many people around the world is a remarkable feat of novelistic genius.
Then I'm going to go out and buy that book on your recommendation. I hope you're going to get a tape or something to put in your car of Julie Andrews. Say that you will.
I will, to the sound of music.
Yeah, you can sing "The Hills Are Alive." Yeah. Exactly. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, docious-expialisticfragilistic-super.
You always
I can
were
do
good
it
at
both
that.
ways. Right. That's it. That's it. Thank you, everybody, for listening to our podcast and watching it on our YouTube channel. Don't forget, you can get it wherever you get your podcast and on Global Player. You can download the app at the store. So keep sending in your questions and answers because we will have our bonus episode coming next. And we do like to hear from you and we love to answer. So there's so much going on and we look forward to it. So for the moment, over and out, and see you in a couple of days with the Q&A. Bye, Jamie.
Bye from New York.